All right, perfect. So we're just going to start right now and talk a little bit about what it actually takes for you to turn someone who signs up for your free trial freemium model and what it actually takes to turn them into a happy paying customer. And so one of the things I'm really excited about today is just to share with you Travis, who is from Gainsight PX, and their whole solution really revolves around how to actually help you do this. And so I'm really excited to both go through with you what this really takes. And so, Travis, why don't you just give us a little bit of background of yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Travis Kaufman, as you can see here on the lead product growth here at Gainsight. And so as far as my background is concerned, I have began my career on the engineering side, found my way into product and then ultimately into marketing. And then now into this, interesting little world of product growth, which is a fascinating combination of what I would consider product and marketing, where like marketing, you are trying to help convey the value of your solution. But unlike marketing, my tool in which to do so is my product. And so at Gainsight here, I'm very focused on what is the experience that our users have with our product and how that can help them understand the value of what we do to incentivize them, one, to become a customer in our trial, which we'll talk about later. But two is where there can be potential expansion opportunities and what are the signals that are occurring and the usage of the product that indicates a customer is ready for an additional set of our offerings. So very happy to be here today.
Awesome. And so, yeah, I guess I kind of fell through the world of product from a different lens as well, through marketing. And I was always doing the kind of traditional way of treating demand gen, where you create those leads, you put up those form fields, and you try and convert them into happy paying customers, but it takes forever. And so whenever I launched a freemium product, when we got to over 100,000 users, very quickly, I started to realize that the product is actually the best marketing you could ever do. And so that's what I'm really excited to share with you today. And so our goal here is to really share with you a framework that you can use to turn your users into happy paying customers. And what I promise you is by the end of this, you're going to look at onboarding in a completely new way. So it's going to be quite a lot of fun. But before we really dive in, I want to ask everyone here, what do you think user onboarding is? Now, I was doing a workshop on this in Lisbon a few weeks ago, and whenever I asked everyone had a different response of what user onboarding is. And so what I would argue user onboarding really is really just helping your user become successful in the product so that they can actually do something in their life. I think there's this misconception that good user onboarding is helping people become the experts at using your product. And I'd actually argue that is quite a lot different. It's about helping them see success in what they can do with your product. And so when we think about that, like what are the top 1% of businesses doing right when onboarding? There's going to be products, we sign up once, we never come back and see them again. And then there's others that completely change the way we live our lives. If you think of what was life like before Google Maps, Messenger, WhatsApp, a lot of those apps really changed something in our life and how we really viewed the way we do things. And so what I'd argue these businesses do extremely well is this. They understand the value they provide, so the perceived value is what they promise people, and they're insanely great at delivering on that value. And not just delivering on the value, but doing that as soon as humanly possible. And that kind of begs the question, if it's really that easy, what are the other 99% of us doing wrong whenever it comes to user onboarding? And so what I'd argue here is that whenever we promise someone something and we don't quite fully deliver on that value, or maybe it just takes us a really long time to deliver on that value, there's a value gap. So a quick example before we dive into the main meat of the presentation, this is Snappa.com. So my friend Chris worked at Snappa, or he's the CEO of it. And so he's promising people on his website, the perceived value here is that, well, you can create this online graphic in a snap. And so that's what he's promising people. But whenever I actually signed up, it actually took me over 10 minutes, which might not sound like a long time, but in the world of B2C, that can take a ton of time. And so I asked my friend Chris and said, like what's going on here? This took quite a while. How many people who sign up for your product actually go into the product? And he didn't know. So he started looking at his analytics and he said, well, there's 27% of people are not going into the product. So I said, huh, interesting. I wonder why. Now, I knew why because I've seen this again and again, but I wanted him to find out on his own. And so he did some digging and he found that there's this one step, which you might have it in your own SaaS, which is the email activation step. And so this is common practice for so many companies. And when you think about it, it's not just one step. There is going in, finding your Gmail or your email provider, then there's clicking on that email, clicking the link in that email, potentially having to re-sign in. And so it could end up being 5 or 6 steps alone. And so this one step was blocking 27% of people from going to the product. So my challenge to Chris was, can we remove this or can we delay it? And so we removed this one step, and this is the monthly recurring revenue that Chris sent me. And so it just kept going up. As soon as he removed this one step, the 27% of people who previously had never gone into the product, they started going to the product, they started seeing value from the product, and they started upgrading like everyone else. And so it was a really quick way for him to boost his MRR by 20%. And so when it comes back to the value gap and how do we eliminate the value gap, time to value is one of the biggest things that we can really improve on. And so that's took me a really long time to really figure this out. And so the framework that I built for onboarding is really just on how can we help people succeed and see value in the product as soon as possible. And so for those of you that are listening, like how many of you have actually played bowling? Let me know in the comments. How about you, Travis?
I've definitely been a bowler.
You've definitely been? Yeah. And so like the first time you played, how many times did you get in the gutter?
I can't even, every time.
Yeah. Like I lost count. There's so many. And so when we think about bowling, it actually has so many similarities between onboarding, oddly enough. So whenever we start playing bowling, what we're usually taught is we want to throw the ball in a straight line to hit all the pins in the middle. The more pins we can knock down, the higher our points, the more likely we are to win the game. And so when we think of our onboarding, I challenge you to think about that in the same context, is how can we create a straight line where we have the absolute minimum number of steps for a user to see success in the product. And if we can do that, then people are going to strike out in our product more often. And by making it easier and quicker for people to do, it's just what's going to happen. And so what I really want you to think about for your onboarding, especially that first experience on the product, if point A is signing up, what are those absolute minimum number of things someone has to do to strike out? And so what I want to challenge everyone listening here is 3 questions. So if you go through these 3 questions, feel free to write them down, but they will help you shape up, like, what does that straight line onboarding experience look like? So the first one is, like, what are those steps that can be eliminated? Now think about your form fields, for instance. A lot of companies have so many extra form fields that are completely useless. And what are some other ones that you've seen, Travis, that you see people can be eliminated most often?
Oh gosh, the form field is certainly a good one. I think even after the fact, I've seen some companies that during their trials, they would introduce an additional verification method, right? So sending them an SMS before you can view this report, give us your cell phone number. And I think we as like, so in the enterprise software companies, I think we have done this because we have gotten so accustomed to optimizing for our own needs. Right. And sacrificing the user's experience, right? Mm-hmm. So we use the phone number, and I say we is this example, to follow up with a phone call afterwards to get the prospect on the phone, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's like, it's making these trade-offs that are sacrificing the user experience because we need something internally.
Right. Definitely. And so there's always those steps you can eliminate. So I want to challenge you to think about, like, what are those steps for your onboarding? And then the next part is, what are those steps you can delay? And now the reason why I'm asking this is because I find most companies treat onboarding like this one-trick pony, where as soon as someone signs up, they're trying to expedite the whole onboarding process so that in that one sitting, you're going to explore the entire product and know everything. And that's not how it works. And so in a lot of companies, there's going to be advanced steps that maybe that would be perfect for a third time, fourth time user to really explore that part of the product. Or maybe you just wait until they view that part of the product and then that onboarding journey starts. And so what are some other examples you can think of here, Travis?
I mean, steps that you can delay. So, I mean, in an example where you're an analytics offering, right? And you need potentially to pull in other data sources. You don't necessarily need the user to go through and connect all the different data sources. It's possible there's one that's very simple to connect where you can demonstrate value. And so delaying the use of the others, I think, is another example, right? So in enterprise software specifically, there are many value propositions, which I think is a challenge for us to want to focus in and hone in on a single value prop. But delaying the others that could be introduced at a later time, I think is one of the just concepts of delaying the non-absolutely required capabilities.
Definitely. And so the last one I'll really mention here is just like, what are those mission critical steps? And so these would be the steps that would be on that straight line experience that would help you get someone to actually see value. And so while you're thinking of like, what are those mission critical steps that you need to have? An example I'd love to share is just Google Analytics. And so if you wanted to actually get any insights into your website, there's one thing you have to do if you sign up for Google Analytics, and that is uploading the script to your website. So if you don't do that step, there's no value in Google Analytics. It's empty, it's useless. And until you do that first quick win, then you can start seeing value. And so a lot of B2B companies have a few steps at least that you need to do in order to see value. And so think about like, what are those absolute things we need to have in this onboarding experience, and just strip it down to that, because then people can strike out more in the product. And so this stat here, a lot of people don't know it. And whenever I ask companies to figure out what it is and if it's as high as this, a lot of them just don't know because they're not measuring it. And it's the fact that 40 to 60% of people, whenever they sign up for a product, they will use it once and never come back. If you don't believe me, look in your own product data and try and find this stat, because oftentimes it's around this and it's pretty scary. So whenever we think about 40 to 60% of people will sign up and never come back, why? So think about it. That's a lot of people. That's over half of the people who sign up for your product will sign up and never come back. And so while you're thinking of that, I'll give you a little bit of a story. So the Bowling Association actually had a pretty big issue. They started noticing that the people who were playing bowling were just the very experienced people. There was no new blood in the game. And so they started realizing like, hey, if we want to be in business and actually grow this business, we got to address this issue, because a lot of people are finding it hard to have fun bowling, and because it takes a while to get good at it. And so what they started to think about is, well, how can we actually make it easier for more people to actually play bowling? And so a fellow in Austin, Texas actually came up with the idea of the bumper. And so if you've been playing bowling, you would probably have tried it maybe once or twice, and it makes it super easy for you to knock down more pins, because your chances of getting the ball into the gutter is almost impossible. And I say almost impossible because I've seen people play bowling like shot put. So maybe there's some outliers there that can still get it in the gutter. But whenever we think of your product and the first time someone goes to actually explore your product, it's going to be really easy for them to get stuck in the gutter. In fact, that 40 to 60% of people, they get stuck in the gutter. They don't actually experience the value. And so you can use product bumpers to really kind of bump people into the right part of the product so they can see more success. And so in this section, Travis is actually going to go through and share with you just what are some examples of product bumpers that you can use for your own product.
So we've got a great collection of product bumpers that Wes had put together. So I'll plan to give you some examples of how we at Gainsight are using these same concepts. So for example, once the user logs into the product, there really are these good 5 set of product bumpers, a progress bar. So in the example of a progress bar, we realized we needed one. We actually hosted a customer advisory board recently, and where we brought in customers of ours who had recently gone through the purchase process with our software. And one of the areas of feedback they gave us was that after they had logged in, they didn't know how much effort it was going to take, how much time it was going to cost them. And so being able to demonstrate and show very specifically what is the effort involved for them to know if they have enough time now to do that, or if they want to defer it and come back, right? Product tours, same thing, making sure that you're orienting them to what is possible within your product and guiding them to a very specific set of capabilities. Checklists, onboarding tooltips, empty states. I'll go ahead and cover all of these in more detail. So here's an example of what we've done at Gainsight. So this is a concept of a progress bar, and it might be a little bit less traditional, but we're showing really two things. When the user first comes into the product, here are the 4 steps, right? And one of those steps is already completed. So we're actually trying to present to them that they have achieved something already, so that they're not starting from nothing every time they have to do an additional step. And then we clearly articulate what the other steps are. And then in the gray font there, you'll see what is the time it's going to take for them to do so. So when they first log in, they see this little progress step. And again, we tried to be a little cute with some of the headings down below, or the the subscript down below. But what we wanted to do is make it very clear what the steps were and how long the steps would take. So this is showing them a sense of progress. It gives them an incentive to understand what is going to happen when they do something. Now, the next example that we have here is a product tour. Now, I've seen a couple of examples of this, and one of them is, as they first log in, there's like a splash screen. It's like, oh, welcome to the product. And, that can offer some initial guidance to the user. What I'm showing you here, I would consider as a little bit more of an advanced step, right? So for enterprise software, you may have multiple value propositions, right? So you may have, in this case, Gainsight PX, there's really 3 core value props. One is an analytics value prop, understanding what users doing your product. The second value prop is helping users adopt your product by introducing some of the concepts we're showing today. And lastly is, how do you get feedback from users to know what is the qualitative, what are some of the things that they're asking you to do as they experience your product? So we have 3 very big, potentially different core value propositions. And how do I get a user to achieve success with all 3 of those? It's impossible, right? And so what we're trying to do here is, when a new user comes into the product, we want to be able to guide their experience based on their interests, right? And so in one example, if we have a specific marketing campaign that is bringing a user to our product, we can key off the in-app experience based upon that campaign. And again, that's a pretty advanced topic to introduce, but something everyone can do is ask, right? If you don't know what the customer's desired outcome is with your software, is to prompt them and collect this information as part of their experience. So what I can then do from here is that if they're interested in, identifying product usage trends, I can then guide them to where in the application that they'll get that information, right? So this is a way for you to give your users a tour. And again, unless your product is very simple and you have a single value prop, you may have a single tour for everyone. But for the more sophisticated applications out there, and I find enterprise software tends to land itself in this category, is being as specific and personalized as possible. So this is an example of product tour. This is actually the introduction of it. The next area is this notion of checklists, right? So what I'm showing you now is an area that persists within our application that shows a list of items that are going to help a new user onboard. And again, instead of assuming that that you're trying to help the user move through something as fast as possible, some people want to move at their own pace. And with a checklist, you can allow them to take the reins a bit, and they can start their own guides this way. They can view the specific documentation. They can know what are the areas of the product and get information that way. So here's an example of how we've incorporated checklists into the trial experience. Now, the next option here is onboarding tooltips. And by no means do I think you need to do all of these all the time. I'm a big fan of looking at what are the users actually needing and then introducing based upon need. You can get that information through, analytics offerings, understanding where drop-offs may occur. You can get that through, a customer advisory board like we did. Get that through feedback in the form of surveys and such. So in this example, what we wanted to do is to emphasize what the setup looked like. So Wes shared the example of Google Analytics, right? You need to install the tag. Our product is very similar, right? You need to install something within your product. And so we've created a video that resides within the application. And what we then do with this tooltip is that as users are navigating throughout the product, maybe clicking around trying to explore and learn, we introduce an area in the product that brings them back to this section to say, hey, these are great that you're looking at these things, but come on back here, and this is where the next step is going to be. So providing a tooltip of where additional context of why something is present is helpful.
Definitely. And I guess on that slide too, like what are some of the most common mistakes you see people make with onboarding tooltips?
Going crazy. I think putting tooltip on everything, like that's what I mean. Like the instinct is to be like, oh, I've got this thing. Let me go put it everywhere, because who doesn't want to know about all of these options on the left, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Starting from what you understand your users actually need, everything else becomes extras. And the extras are good to highlight, but not all at the same time. It's actually a great example you called out of like things to defer, right? So in our case, we're deferring integrations. We're deferring a lot of things. We're trying to focus on that initial, completing that initial setup. Other areas that I think, that's probably one of the highlights, is that people kind of, they grab onto this new technology and they just kind of bring it everywhere. And if you're introducing it everywhere, then it's just now more noise. So being very specific on where you put things. I think personalizing is also something that, I see companies not thinking through enough.
Okay.
And I say personalization in the fact that, with technologies like Gainsight PX, you can introduce messages to your users whenever you want, right? New alerts, let's say you have a new product announcement, that's great. But what I find is that companies are often introducing announcements that are irrelevant to their users, and potentially blocking the conversion that you want to take, right? So, for example, publishing release notes, it's not all that valuable to show your new product release notes to someone who just entered your product. Right. So the fact that you're not segmenting properly on who should actually see something and where they should see it and what their needs are, I think it's another mistake. So whatever solution you're looking at, make sure that you've got the ability to segment properly, so you don't overload a user or introduce just extraneous communications.
Yeah, that's a good point. I remember it was a few weeks ago, I was signing up for Drift, and a lot of people know Drift as like a live chat solution, but they've recently introduced a new video product. And so it was the first time signing up for Drift, and I'm going through it, and then I get this like modal as soon as I get to the dashboard, like, here's our video product. I'm like, I don't care. Like, this is not what I signed up for. I want the live chat part. This is like something you could totally delay. And so I think what you're mentioning is segmentation. You have to have that for here, because I think a lot of people just treat it almost like a pop-up. Like everyone who goes to this page sees it, but that shouldn't always be the case.
Yeah, exactly right. So the last item here, and I didn't intentionally say the best for last, but I do think this is one of the most interesting concepts to apply, is this concept of addressing the empty state. In the software that I've built in the past, shame on me, but I really didn't. I was worried more about it doing what it was supposed to do. What was the functionality that the product was supposed to do, and did it do it? Less so about helping my users understand what they needed to do in order to get the value from it. So, I put expectations on my customer-facing teams. I have a customer success team. They're going to onboard my customers. They're going to show them all this stuff. And that works for a period of time, but ultimately, if your business is growing and successful, is that you're going to get constrained on resources on all fronts. And so you need to start focusing on how you can scale some of these efforts, right, by incorporating the experience in the product. So what I'm showing you here, this is a retention analysis, as it's one of the features of our offering. And because it is dependent upon data, if we were to expect users to sign up for our trial, install the product, which we know takes, it's not happening in the same second, and then have the data populate, we're looking at a turnaround time of potentially 2 weeks, right? No one's going to sit there for 2 weeks and come back, and it was just a long time to value. And so what we had intentionally done here was introduced, what does this look like, and what are the benefits of this capability once data is populated? So again, this is a little bit of a shortcut to addressing empty state, which is kind of beyond the additional, here's your call to action. There's nothing to show here, but here's what you do when you click this button. I think that's a good starting point. But I think being able to show the users what they're going to get if they do something is also a good way for you to incentivize the action. So the example that this came into play, we had a new Well, the other thing that I'm introducing here is that we've got the benefit messaging, which is typically like a marketing exercise that lives on your marketing site, right? So with a trial, what we saw is we had one person sign up for the trial. They invited a colleague. Their colleague didn't look at the website at all. And so they were in the product for a total of 3 minutes and left and never came back. We were lucky enough to get some feedback from them. We followed up afterwards.
Right.
And they shared with us, here were the issues that we saw. But really, they gave a 3-minute time window. They didn't look at anything on the website. And so there was no notion of what were the value propositions they would get with our software. Right. So by addressing empty state in this form, we're showing them what this looks like and what the value they could get, and also introducing the benefit messaging within the product itself. So I think enterprise software, this is, I don't know, I think this is one of the most critical things to get right, or at least put energy into getting something in place. When you have a trial of your software, the old expectation that you have a sales rep on the phone with them, talking to them while they're doing it, is unrealistic. And that may be the case where sometimes you do. But more often than not, people are interested in self-discovery. They want to experience the product yourself. And if they can't understand it, it's going to be put into the, I'm going to get to this someday, maybe bucket.
Definitely.
All right. And so the last item we'll leave you with is empty states. So putting all these concepts together, if your product has addressed empty state properly, you are guiding new users through, through the onboarding sequences that we showed you, then you're able to really show them what your product can do and help incentivize them and show them what the actions are to take it, as well as understand the effort. So all of these components, this didn't happen overnight, right? We didn't wake up and go like, we have to address all 5 of these right now. It's actually great that Wes is putting this framework together, because what we were doing is we were going through bit at a time, and we're saying, gosh, wouldn't it be great if? We get feedback from our customers. We go through this iteration. We say like, oh gosh, addressing empty state, if you go talk to our engineering teams, if you have an analytics offering, it can be a very heavy lift for them to try to bake in the right data that helps you tell the right story. And it often gets put on the shelf. So this was this type of addressing empty state was something that is much more palatable for you to get done in your product itself without sacrificing too much of the R&D investment that you're probably already scarce to have delivered on today. So I'll go ahead and hand it back to Wes here to finish up part 3, which is the conversational bumper.
Awesome. And so the last part of the Bowling Alley framework is really just thinking about, all right, what are we going to do when people don't do specific things in the product? And what are some of those signals that we could really look for to really prompt them and help them wherever they are in the user journey? And so people are always going to be leaving your product. So we need to think about, okay, when are they leaving? How do we bring them back? What are some of those key prompts we could do? And so the story I'm going to give you here is really with Toyota. So Toyota, as you might know, is a car manufacturing company, but it wasn't always very successful. And so they had this one problem, like many other car manufacturers, where they had an inventory issue. So how it used to work is car manufacturers would come up with a really big forecast, then they'd get to work building all those cars. Now, if they sold all those cars, great, they did their job well. But what often happened is they would actually might be a little optimistic on those sales forecast, and then they'd be left over with millions and millions of dollars of inventory. And so for any car manufacturer, if you get a couple of those, maybe recalled cars or just cars that didn't sell that well, you could actually go bankrupt. And meanwhile, you built this massive business which employs thousands of employees, and that's really scary. And so what Mr. Toyota really started to do is look at the grocery store. And so when he was in the grocery store, he started to realize that, wait a minute, there's people don't go to the grocery store just because. They go for certain reasons. And one of those reasons might be, hey, my fridge is empty. I need to go get some food. Or I'm just hungry. I need to go to the grocery store. And so what he started to realize is that the way people work is that we're all living our lives based on certain signals. And so what he started to realize is, if you start looking for signals in your business, you can start, in his case, seeing, okay, when are people buying cars? How many cars do we need to create now? And build a distribution whole system based on every single signal. And so what I find, at least when it comes to onboarding, is that most people treat it as just in case. They create maybe 10 emails for their user onboarding email sequence. And regardless of if you're Sally or Jeremy and you do something totally different in the product, you're getting the same thing. And so that's where you get a lot of annoyed customers or even just users because they're getting the same thing. It's all canned. It's saying like, did you do this in the product? Here's the link to do it. Nobody likes those kind of email prompts or anything else. So what I challenge you to think about is, what are examples of signals? What are people telling you in your product? And so I'm going to give you 3 that I believe are the most important signals that you need to look out for and what you can do in response. So the first signal is, what do people do whenever they sign up? So if someone signs up, what can we send them? So an example might be, let's send them that welcome email and then maybe a usage tip email, which if you're not sure what a usage tip email is, here's the down low. So whenever I signed up for Wistia's Soapbox product, which is a Chrome extension where you can record your screen, I created my first video, but I didn't share it with anyone. And so if you know what Wistia does, they do video analytics really well. So if I wanted to actually experience the value of the product, I needed to share the video with someone. And so think about in your own product, even back to that Google Analytics example from the beginning. If someone didn't upload the scripts, remind them, let them know that that is what is stopping them getting in the way of seeing value from the product. And so think about the next signal is, okay, if someone has a quick win in the product, so let's say they did upload that script to their website, or in your case for Gainsight PX, like they did do the same thing. Now the retention analysis part is ready. So let's prompt them to access that data that they previously had never had access to. And let's really drive them forward to that part. And regardless if you use email, SMS, or some other kind of in-app notification, it doesn't necessarily matter which ones you use. It's just important to look for what are those signals and how can we help people. And so the last signal I really focus in on is the desired outcome. So let's say someone goes into your product and actually experiences the full value that you promised. This is when you can really focus on the sales side and it becomes 10 times more effective. And so I find a lot of companies, they just start sending all of like the salesy emails really way too early. And it's a little bit premature when you haven't actually experienced the value. Whereas in this case, when we're looking for the signal of, okay, someone has experienced the desired outcome, they get the value, our value proposition actually means something to these people. They have actually experienced it. And so what you're going to find is even if your sales reaches out at this point, or you send case study emails that combat all the current objections that people might have with your products, this stuff actually converts. And so when you're thinking about how do I turn those free users into happy paying customers, the whole goal, especially for this part, is looking at, okay, what are they doing and are they actually seeing success? And once they do experience the value of the product, then we can flip the switch onto more of a sales-driven email sequence to really help people take that next step and experience the value of the product again and again. And so what I'd really like you to focus in on is just think about, from a bumper standpoint, like where are people dropping off in your product? What are people not doing that we could drive them back to the product and actually see more value? Because the whole goal of this bowling alley framework is, let's get people as many strikes as possible so they can see success in the product and experience it on their own terms. And so to really wrap up, what I want you to think about here is this. So the value gap is what is preventing you from really helping your users see success. And so we all promise people something, which is the perceived value. It's what's on our website copy. And what's the difference between the top 1% of companies that are really doing well with their onboarding is that they deliver on their value extremely quickly and help these people become successful. And so the real kind of nemesis of onboarding is really that value gap. And that can be just a long time to value, ton of friction in the process. So the more we declare war on that, the closer we can get to this and really helping people experience the value of their product quicker. And so I really hope you enjoyed the bowling alley framework. If you would like to get the full chapter from the book that I wrote on product-led growth, just go to this URL. You will get access to the full chapter for free. And then, Travis, want to tell us a little bit more about this?
Yeah, so everyone who's attending the webinar today, I mean, I welcome you to start a trial of Gainsight PX. Simply go to gainsight.com/PX. So the examples that I shared are all delivered through Gainsight PX as an offering. So again, helping your users find value. It's no accident. It's a combination of understanding what it is that they're doing and not doing, and being able to help drive them to that value through a set of very personalized in-app as well as out-of-application engagement. So, I welcome you to start your free trial, gainsight.com/px. I'm happy to answer any further questions you have related to Gainsight's offerings.
Awesome. So I'm just going to switch over the screen so we can do the Q&A. But while I'm doing that, like, what do you feel the majority of the people get wrong with user onboarding?
What do I think people get wrong? One, there's no focus on it at all. I think go back to enterprise software, because that's a lot of the examples that I see, is that you assume that it's someone else's role to fix, right? So you said, I have this customer success team. They have an onboarding team dedicated to doing this. And it's almost the not my problem scenario with enterprise companies. And I think we often focus too much on other things, right? The feature functions that exist, like always kind of deprioritizing. I think it's really easy to deprioritize until you understand what the loss is that you're getting, right? So, I mean, that's one potential example.
Okay. And so for the overall, like, some of the parts around conversational bumpers, like, what are some of those things that you've seen work really well for people to really bump people back into the product experience and see more value?
Yeah, so there's actually a couple of them that I can use. One of them is an example that we've used, which is actually using email to bring users back. And, very similar to like marketing automation platforms where you want to send a sequence of, emails to someone. What's important to call out with, the concept of a conversational bumper is that you're only going to send it if they need it, right? So if they haven't taken the desired action after what is a reasonable amount of time, that's when you introduce it, right? So by that alone, there's more context to it, and it's potentially a welcomed interaction as opposed to, yes, it's now Monday at 6 a.m. I'm going to give you an email, right?
Right.
So making sure that all of your interactions are based upon some action that a user did or did not take in your product, I think that's very helpful. The second area is actually enforcement, right? So if you have a 15-day trial, you can't operate on the honor system, right? So introducing effective paywalls at the right time and making sure that those paywalls or those gates present a clear call to action, right? So I think many companies I see either aren't enforcing it, which is a huge mistake. And then the second piece that they're potentially not doing is making the call to action very clear, right? So if you do have a trial experience, and let's say you do need to speak with a rep before you can actually purchase the offering, is that it's very clear that that event is tracked so your team can follow up with the prospect. Or in the ideal case is that you're presenting that prospect saying, hey, your trial is up, but here's exactly what you need to do and who you need to contact to get it going again. So those are some other scenarios where using the product as a vehicle, being very very intentional based upon what they've done, not necessarily what you want always.
Right.
Put it.
And so one of the questions I got before the webinar is just, how do you decide whether you should have this free trial, a freemium, or even some hybrid model?
Freemium and free trial, I think they're one of the factors, and actually Wes and I, we've talked about this before, is what is your volume, your total addressable market, right? If you have the potential for millions of users to be coming into your product and then using it and purchasing that way, it's potentially an opportunity for a freemium type offering. The other factor to freemium versus a trial is that there's cost. The cost of you delivering that free trial, if you are a very, let's say, data-centric SaaS solution, and it's going to cost for you as an organization to store it, it may be cost prohibitive to introduce a pure freemium offering. So if the cost is low and the market is the volume of people interacting in that trial is high, then you could look at a freemium offering. The trial, I find, for enterprise software companies, but for many of them, to be a very successful vehicle to establish trust, right? So more and more often, the buyers that are interacting with the software, that value gap, they haven't seen it. I mean, they've seen it many, many times from many, many companies. And they now come to you and you're like, oh yes, instantly magic for free. And they go, okay, yeah, right. They're already expecting this gap to exist. And so one way for you to establish trust with them is to offer a time-based trial, to where you're putting, your money where your mouth is. That's not the right phrase. You're setting the example of what can be done. You're walking the walk, not talking the talk. That's the way.
So recently, like my whole view on that, answering that question was always like, I really looked at time to value. And so I was having this conversation with Patrick Campbell, who's the CEO of ProfitWell, and it really changed kind of the way I viewed it. And so initially it was like nice and cut and dry. If you got a long time to value, it's like, maybe it's sales led, maybe it's a free trial for you, and like freemium just don't do it. But then I started to look at a lot of other products, and I'll give you an example. So one of the ladies who spoke at the Product Led Summit, I believe the product's called Tetra. So it's a wiki essentially for your company. And so initially they had a free trial, but you think about building a wiki in like 14, 15 days, it's not going to happen. Like, you're not going to build that wiki. And maybe it just, in that first 15 days, it just looks like a nice Google Doc to use, and you're not going to get much value out of it. And so they decided to actually go freemium. And what they realized is that was actually the right model for them, because it took people so long to see value from that particular product. And so what are your thoughts on time to value in terms of freemium? And is freemium actually better if you have a longer time to value in some cases?
I mean, it sounds like it could be. I mean, I can speak from our example here is, we were primarily doing a trial to establish trust. The cost for us to delivering it, because we are a data-centric solution, there are costs to it, and we do have a sales organization that is very good at kind of the enterprise sales motion. And so what we found was introducing a trial experience was a way for us to complement what we were doing on the sales side, to be more efficient and potentially help attract a more self-service buyer. So, in terms of time to value, it's going to be a spectrum, right? I think there are, when there is low time to value, I think introducing this concept potentially is easier, right? And I think when you have potentially longer time to value, I think you need to get potentially more creative on helping customers understand what needs to happen to get the value. But I don't think it completely takes it off the table. I mean, you kind of put the high time to value, or maybe potentially high complicated or high customizable products. Some will short because it's not possible. But what those same companies will be doing is a very high touch POC process with their customers, right? And so in some cases, a product-led approach like this is supporting what would typically have been a very high touch POC process and making it more efficient. So it's not, I don't think it's necessarily an all or nothing, or it's trial or freemium or nothing. I think there's a spectrum in between of where you can use your product to help drive both customer acquisition and retention and growth. So
definitely, yeah. And I find a lot of people just don't realize that you can mix them. It's like, maybe you start with a free trial, and then if someone doesn't convert, you roll them on to the free plan. I've seen some companies do this really, really well, where an example would be Nudge.ai. And so if you sign up for their free trial, like, you get access to everything. It's a premium experience. And then if you don't convert, they give you access to their free Chrome extension, and that sits in your Gmail and enriches all the contacts. But what you don't realize is that, well, their logo is like front, right, left, and center in your email. And like, you're spending, a lot of professionals are spending anywhere from 2 to 3 hours in their email every single day. Imagine how expensive that would be from a marketing perspective to get in front of your buyer for 2 to 3 hours every single day. And they might not be looking at you, but that's building awareness to a whole new level. And so I think in terms of thinking about how you mix the two strategies together, sometimes giving away your product can be really good if you do have something more visible. And so we just have one question from Roxy about, like, how do you decide the length of the trial, which I think is a really great question.
Yeah.
Want to kick it off?
Sure. Yeah. So when we went through this process at Gainsight, we had an understanding of what were the activities that needed to happen in the product in order for customers to realize value. And we looked at the average time it took for that to happen. And then we set our trial experience on the more aggressive side of how long that typically takes, right? So just under the average. And we did that for a couple of reasons. One is that, we internally have revenue targets to hit. And so we wanted to make sure that it was relatively time bound. So it came down to setting it at a roughly 15-day period. There were debates around it being 15 days or 30 days or completely open-ended, which is much more, looks like a freemium type motion. But we knew that we didn't have the brand awareness at the time in this space, which is the product experience space, to have a high volume of trials or new trials coming to the product. And so we kind of shut down the idea of going a pure freemium route.
Right.
Yeah, so that's how we went about it. It was actually, what is the time to value, and then being a little bit more aggressive on what that looks like. I'm trying to think if there was an interesting study done that talked about conversion rates relative to duration of trial and also duration of either monthly or annual contracts. I'll see if I can find that. That was also some helpful information around, if your conversion rates are the same after 30 days and 15, opt for 15, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, so that's how we approached it here. I'm sure there's other ways. I don't know if Wes, have you seen other approaches on setting the length of it?
Yeah, so one of the things I like to look for is just like how long does it actually take people to convert? Because you can have a 15-day free trial and maybe people convert on day 30 or day 90, which is actually really common for a lot of folks. And so I like to look at like how long does it actually take people to convert? And then there's also the concept of Parkinson's law, where it states that like things will take people as long as you give them time to do things. And so that's why I think a lot of companies just don't see a big dip whenever they go from, like, say, a 30-day free trial to a 14-day, because people are going to spend the same amount of time trying to figure this out. Maybe they're just going to front load it and spend that time earlier on. But there is some issues too with, let's say, actually time capping it. And what I've actually seen for one of the competitors in this room, so more so around the concept of, let's say if your product is dependent on other people doing specific things, like a developer implementing a code onto your actual platform, that can take a really long time. So if there is certain bottlenecks in the process and you have a 14, 15-day free trial, that can really hurt your conversion rate, because now before the end of the trial they might even just purchase it, but like guiltily, they're just trying to figure it out on their ends, like how to actually use this product, if it's a good fit for them. And so the idea of a usage-based free trial is also kind of interesting as well, if that is an issue where you do have a bottleneck for your business that doesn't rely on the actual user, and just thinking about, okay, what is the usage? How much of this product are we going to give away for someone to really get a good feel for it in their business? So I hope that answered your question, Roxy. And if there's any more questions, definitely let us know. But for now, we're going to end the broadcast. And thank you so much for attending and learning more about how to convert your users into happy paying customers.
Great. Thanks again for hosting, Wes.
No worries. It's been awesome.